In this tutorial, I will show two ways for creating a floor finish. The first way is using a 2D texture to create a 3D flooring. The second is I will use a 3D flooring texture that I can apply directly. For this 2D flooring, if I open my files, I actually have a timber material stored in there. You can also find the same timber material on Mel. This material has already been duplicated 3 times onto the surface, and I will go to my layer menu, and in the options I duplicate the layer to my garden drawing. Currently it's called garden progress because I saved it as a progress file. I don't overwrite the base file. So once I have the timber pattern imported into my drawing, you can see that it's actually very big. So I can scale it down a bit. So edit, transform, scale, and I can scale it a bit smaller, but also no need to scale it too small. Okay, once done, press enter to confirm. Now you can see that currently in my drawing I have a vanishing point on the right, which we have created in the previous tutorial. I've also added a vanishing point towards the left side, which I've done in a similar way, only instead of our left wall here, I've used the wall on the right as my guide. So I've taken the pen tool and I've clicked at the top of the wall, the second point on the horizon and the third point at the bottom of the wall, and then with the direct select tool I have moved towards the left until such a point that the vanishing lines of the path are nicely or reasonably nicely aligned to the walls. And you can see in this case that is more or less the case. As I mentioned before, this is not a rocket science approach. Do I want to delete? Yes. Okay, going back to the timber materials. So once I have imported these timber materials, I have to pull them into perspective, and to do so I edit it, transform and distort, very similar to what we've done to the walls. But this time around it's going to be a bit more complex. Namely, the horizontal lines in this case, I can align them towards my right vanishing point, and the vertical walls, I will align them towards my left vanishing points. That is going to be a little bit more tricky, but basically it's something like this, and then actually the top one I can still sort of align it towards the wall, the bottom of the wall. Yes, and now I will do the vertical one. So now the horizontal lines have been aligned. Now I am going to realign the vertical lines. So this one goes all the way there so that it points towards that point there. And then this one also points towards that point, making sure that everything still aligns. So like this is more or less correct. So you can see that the horizontal lines here at the top and here at the bottom are both pointing towards these vanishing points, while the lines that were vertical before both more or less point to this vanishing point. And once I'm happy with that, I press enter to confirm. Now the last thing that remains is to select the area that is covered by the timber deck and leave the other areas blocked. So I can use my path tool. I can also use, again, I can use my polygonal lasso tool. I can use my normal lasso tool, but the magic wand tool may not be particularly appropriate because there is too much variation in the colors. So the good thing about the pen tool is that even if I'm not very accurate around the corners, I don't have to worry too much, but because later with the direct select tool, I can still fix it, which saves me some effort. I have fast forwarded a bit, so now I have selected the area that I want to be covered, and now I switch back on the timber deck pattern. I can go to my path and make a selection with a 1-point feather radius, and after I've made my selection, I can simply go to my layers and add the layer mask. So now you can see that my timber deck has been added as a texture to my pathway. Now, currently I have made the timber deck sort of parallel to the back wall here, and if I were intending to use my timber deck with the opposite orientation, I could very simply import the timber deck again and instead of skewing the vertical lines parallel to the left point, I could skew them to the right point. So I'll just quickly show that. So I duplicate this timber layer again into my garden, and I do edit, transform, scale it down a little bit first, right? And then edit, transform, and distort. So now, previously the horizontal lines were pointing towards the right vanishing point, the vertical ones to the left. So now I'm going to do it exactly the other way around. So I'm going to take the horizontal ones and point them towards the left vanishing point, like so. And the vertical ones towards the right vanishing point. Now I have a bit of a problem here on the left, that it seems like something is missing, which is a bit strange. So I can even overtake it, it doesn't matter much, as long as the points are aligned properly. That's about it. Then I press enter to confirm, right? So now I have my orientation of my timber deck turned around. I can just use my timber deck layer mask, and with the alternate I just drag it onto my new timber deck, and I can see my timber deck aligned differently. So now I have two timber decks to choose from, either aligned towards one wall or the other wall, and I can choose which ones I like best. In this case I like the one with a vertical alignment better, because it gives more character. So this is one way of creating a flooring, by using any 2D texture to turn it into 3D. A more easy way of creating a 3D texture is by using a already 3D pattern. So it's basically a photo of a floor. So I can find an image on the internet, and I've looked through some images. This is an example of an image that would work, because it has quite a decent open area of paving that I can work with. And the paving is photographed in a normal perspective. If you would take a picture of a paving that is sort of photographed in a very low angle, or with lots of objects on it, or from a high perspective looking down, then these kind of materials will not come across very realistic. But as long as the photo is taken from a normal sort of eye level perspective looking forward, very similar to this particular picture here, then it could be quite suitable. So I take that image and I open it in Photoshop like this, and I will then import it into my drawing. So I duplicate the layer into my drawing. Right, now I can close it. Then in my drawing I will realign the image to a way that the eye level, again, there's a person in here, which can be helpful, and the eye level is set to the horizon. So then I realign it. I can see that here there's still that stone that may be a little bit in my way, so in order to prevent that from happening, I scale it up a little bit more. Something like this. Then I can move down my picture a bit, like that. And then next, what I will do is I can hide it and I can select the area. So in this case, I want to fill this particular triangle here with my paving. So I will use the pen tool. In this case, a polygonal lasso tool is also quite okay because it's actually quite a small area. But because I like to have a bit of that feather radius, I will use the pen tool instead. Make selection. Okay, small feather radius. I go back to my layer and make it visible, and here we go, and we have a layer mask. Now, as long as I keep my my horizon aligned more or less, I can still move around the picture. So I delink the picture from the layer mask, and then I can move around the picture to see if there's any angle that I like better. See, that gives me a bit of variation. There's not that much room to move, but I could, for instance, align the paving to the corner like this. Okay, I'm happy with this. So this concludes the next tutorial for 2 ways of adding a paving material. Now, of course, currently I haven't added the vertical band that defines the paving, which you could either do it a homogeneous brown, or you can actually take the paving timber material and set it vertically. So I could do image and then rotate and then 90 clockwise and then duplicate this into my drawing and then here. So, and then we scale it quite a bit, transform scale to something reasonable, just up to there. Something like that will do. Hide it. I could put it in perspective, but it does not add much. Now I can use again my pen tool to define this area here. Ready? Then I go to my path, I make a selection. Wait, I need to switch on my layer first. So then I go to my path, I make a selection. Why is it refusing? Oh, it's because I made a small subpath. Make a selection and then go back to my layer and I apply the layer mask. So now I have a vertical edge here. Just to make it a bit more realistic, I can make the brightness and contrast and make it a bit darker. So I reduce the brightness of the layer. I'm using the layer mask instead of the layer. So that doesn't work. So I need to make sure I have the layer selected, not the layer mask. Image, adjust, brightness, contrast. I reduce the brightness a bit just to make it pop out a bit. That makes it more 3D. And like that, my timber deck is finished.